Gamers, what's going on? We're back with another video. This time we're gonna be building and tuning a drift car. So why should you even want to make your own drift build? Well, drifting is actually a lot of preference on what you like the car to feel like and stuff like that. And when you download a tune off the tune menu, you actually can't edit it. You're stuck with whatever they put in the tune. So it really helps you dial in the stuff that you want to have on your own build, and it helps you learn a lot about the game. First things first, what kind of car do you use for drifting? Usually it's a car with rear wheel drive and front engine. And in today's video, we're going to be using this Mustang. And real quick, let me just cover the settings in 2 seconds. You want to have traction control off, stability control off, and then shifting in manual mode. Usually when you're drifting, you're only in 1 or 2 gears total for most of your drifts. So you really want to keep it in those gears with manual mode. Okay, so let's take this Mustang and start putting some mods on it. So for engine, this is basically anything power related. You can really do as much or as little power as you want, anywhere from 300-ish horsepower up to over 1,000. You can drift with any amount of power. It's all preference, really. I generally like more power than less, so for this part I'm going to put race parts on everything for the engine to increase the horsepower by as much as possible. Okay, so with all that done, now we'll go to the next section, which is braking and handling. So for brakes, you do want to install race brakes to unlock the brake tuning feature, and that's something that we're going to tune later on. I'll show you that in the tune section of the video. Springs and dampers, you want to put on the drift springs and dampers. Always put on the drift option if there is one. Anti-roll bars, you want to put these on upgraded all the way so you get the stiffness tuning. Chassis reinforcement, I usually put this on just so the car feels a little stiffer. That's my preference. You don't really need this. And weight reduction, you usually want to put it all the way to race reduction minus 700 pounds. Wow. Okay, next section is drivetrain. This we're going to just upgrade the clutch because why not? For transmission, we do want to use at least up to the race transmission to unlock full gear ratio tuning. You can put any amount of gears that you want. I'm going to stick with the 6-speed in this car. Driveline, usually just upgrade because why not? And differential, you do want to use the drift diff. Okay, the next section, tires and rims. For tire compound, this car does have drift tires, so we're going to put those on. For tire width, it really depends on the amount of power that we're going to use. We're not doing anything really crazy, so I'm going to make the tires in the front 10 mil wider, and I'm actually going to leave the rears as they are stock. I just widen the front a little bit just to get a little more grip, and I don't want too much grip in the rear, so I'm going to leave the rear tires stock. That's kind of my preference. If you're doing a really high horsepower build, then you do want to widen the rear tires, but not for this build that I'm doing in this video. For rims, you can generally pick anything just for the best looks. Rim size, will make these a little bit bigger just for the looks once again. And then for front and rear track width, I usually like to go a little bit wider in the front than I do in the rear. So I'm going to do 2 ticks up in the front and only 1 tick up in the rear. So the front stays just a little bit wider for a little bit more stability in the front of the car when we're drifting. Next, we have aero and appearance. This is preference unless you want to put on the adjustable stuff for this car, which I guess we will for this video just to show you what it's like. The car might not look the best with this rear wing, but I'm going to leave it on just to show you the downforce tuning in the tuning section later on. And then we have conversion. We'll put a supercharger on this car to make it a little bit more powerful, add a little bit more torque as well. And that's probably all we're going to do for that. And that concludes the mods section of this video. So let's install the setup. We're up to 721 horsepower, which in real life is a ton. In this game, it's probably in the middle somewhere because some cars have like 1,500 horsepower. So now I'm not even going to drive the car. I'm going to go straight into tuning and show you everything there is to make a base tune. And then we're going to go through and tweak it a little bit to our liking. For tires, I usually set the rear pressures a little bit lower just for a little bit more grip in the rear, and the car doesn't feel too stiff or too slippery or anything. We do want to slide when we drift, but not too much and spin out and stuff like that. We want to have some control over the drift. For gearing, I almost always make this gearing much shorter than it is. It's actually really long in this car, so I'm gonna bring it out to, let's do a round number, we'll do a 4 final drive ratio. So the gearing is shorter than usual and it makes each individual gear a little bit closer together. You want the gears usually closer together, so if you shift in the middle of a drift, you're not gonna bog down the engine too much if you upshift, for example. If the gears are too far apart and you shift from say 4th to 5th and you're too low in the RPMs in 5th gear, you might bog out and you might lose the drift on that. Okay, so for the alignment section of this tuning guide, this is the standard specs that it gives you when you put on drift suspension. Camber is the tops of the tires pointing towards each other. That's what negative camber is, and it helps a lot with turning, so usually drift builds have this all the way up. All the way negative, I mean. The rear, I usually just leave at whatever the drift suspension is as well. A little bit of rear negative camber. For front toe, this is the inward and outward angle of the wheels, and I usually put a little bit of front toe out to help turn in once again, to make the car feel more nimble in the front end. Rear, I usually leave it 0. I've played with this a little bit, but I haven't really found anything that works better than just leaving it as is, so that's what I do. And then caster, I usually leave as is. I've never really seen anybody change caster in any of their builds. For anti-roll bars, this adjusts the body roll of the car. Because the Mustang is generally a pretty big car, I'm gonna stiffen these up just a little bit. On lighter cars, I will actually leave this a little bit softer, but the Mustang is a big beast, so I make them a little stiffer. That's just my preference. This section is mostly preference. For springs, this is also preference. I am going to make these a little bit stiffer. Like I said before, this car is pretty heavy compared to a lot of other drift cars. Take like a Miata, for example. It's not that heavy. But for this, I'm going to make it a little bit stiffer to make the car feel a little more nimble, even though this car probably weighs a lot. This section is also preference, though. Ride height, don't really see many people change. You just keep it as low as it can go because that's how drift cars do their thing. Damping, so we have rebound and bump. I'm going to explain bump first. Bump is the rate at which the suspension is compressed into the car, so how fast the wheel goes into the wheel well, and rebound is when it's rebounding back out to full extended length when you're driving around. For this, I'm probably going to leave these. I might stiffen them up slightly, but for the most part, I'm going to leave this. I usually don't touch these too much unless there's something that I really need to change. For aero, this is your front and rear downforce with that adjustable front splitter or the adjustable rear wing. For the purposes of this video, usually I don't change these too much, but I'm going to put the front splitter to a little bit more towards cornering for more downforce. It probably won't make a whole lot of difference, but it'll make the front a little more stable and easier to control the direction of the drift. For braking force, I usually put the braking force slider to all the way to 0%, which actually means that only the front tires will be braking. Force is backwards with this, I guess. If you put it all the way to rear, that means only the front is braking. And the braking force, I'm going to put at 50% here. And the reason why I do this is with only the front wheels braking, you can actually brake in the middle of a drift to control how fast you're going through the corner. And if you brake on the rear wheels at all, like if this was back at 50%, then you would probably kill your drift. But if you're only braking on the front wheels, you can brake mid-corner while you're drifting and you won't really screw up the drift that much. And 50% is just so the braking is a little bit smoother. It will make the braking of the car much worse in a straight line, but we're really only using this car to drift. So I want to lower the force a little bit so I could brake mid-corner and not disturb the car too much. For differential, this is usually a must. I put these at 100%, which is 100% locked. And that's what a lot of drift builds do. This means that both rear tires will spin at exactly the same rate. Some builds will have them at like 90 or so. That's if the car is like really unstable or something like that. I think that'll stabilize it a little bit. But for most beginners and most builds, you could just leave these at 100%. And that covers everything in the tuning section of this guide. And now we're going to test out this Mustang and I'm gonna see how it feels. Okay, now our Mustang is looking good. It's looking ready to drift. I'm gonna go up here to actually my favorite drift zone in the game because it's tight and technical and I think it's just more fun. And we're gonna see how it feels right off the bat. So this is no cuts, no nothing. This is my first attempt through here. Car feels pretty good. I'm a little bit banging off the limiter in 4th. I might try 5th next time we go back. Oh, I'm not sure if there's enough power for 5th. We almost bogged down. So it looks like we're gonna use 4th for most of this drift section. And the car actually feels pretty good. I'm gonna go back one more time and see if I could find anything that we want to change. Had to use a little e-brake there because I didn't come in fast enough, but at lower speeds, this thing is very nice. It actually feels pretty good to go the way it is. I feel like it's a little bit grippy, so I'm gonna turn this up a little bit to reduce a slight bit of rear grip, and I'm also gonna stiffen up the rear of the car just a little bit, which is really just my preference, but otherwise the car feels actually very good. Lower the rear downforce just a little bit. The other changes I made were to make the car a little bit stiffer, and most of the time when you make the car stiffer, it's a slight bit less grip for a little bit more nimble feeling car. So let's see how that does. There's probably not a whole lot of change in the way it looks, but the way it feels when you're driving it is usually much more subtle and you can actually notice. Now the car, to me, feels pretty good. This is mostly my preference to keep the car a little bit stiff. Some people have their cars much softer, but most of the roads in this game are usually pretty smooth too, so you don't have to worry too much about the car being too stiff for the most part. Wow, actually, really nice feeling build. That's pretty much it. That's how you build and tune a drift car in Forza Horizon 5. I'm doing the outro while I'm drifting. This is sick. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions, and usually I answer every comment, so I will get around to it. And subscribe if you feel like sticking around for more of these types of videos, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.